Is this some kind of joke? Security Chief Marcus Reynolds' voice crackled through the radio as he watched the elderly gardener slowly push his wheelbarrow across the corporate campus lawn. The man was maybe 65, 70, wearing faded work clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that had seen better days. He moved with the deliberate pace of someone who had all the time in the world, trimming hedges and pulling weeds as if the bustling tech campus around him didn't exist. Reynolds stood in the glass-walled Security Operations Center, surrounded by screens showing every angle of the 50-acre Nexus Technologies headquarters. His team of 12 security officers monitored the feeds, their eyes trained on entry points, parking structures, and the steady flow of employees moving between buildings. They were young, well-trained, equipped with the latest tactical gear and communication systems. Reynolds had handpicked each one of them. The old gardener had been a fixture on campus for about 6 months. Nobody knew much about him except his name, William Turner, and that he worked for the landscaping company contracted to maintain the grounds. He showed up every morning at 6, worked quietly until 3, and left without saying much to anyone. Reynolds had noticed him because he was an anomaly. In a world of rushed schedules and constant motion, Turner moved like he was from a different era, slow, methodical, almost invisible. "Chief, we've got the quarterly security briefing in 10. Officer Sarah Chen called from her station. "The executives want an update on the new badge access protocols." Reynolds nodded but kept his eyes on the monitor showing Turner. The old man had stopped his wheelbarrow near Building 3 and was now pruning a rosebush with careful, precise movements. Something about him bothered Reynolds, though he couldn't put his finger on what. "That gardener," Reynolds said to no one in particular. "How long has he been working that same section?" Chen glanced at her screen. "Turner? About 20 minutes. Why?" "Just seems odd. That's the 3rd time this week he's worked that exact spot." "Maybe the roses need extra attention," Chen offered with a slight smile. Reynolds shrugged it off and headed to the briefing room. He had more important things to worry about than an elderly gardener with a meticulous work ethic. William Turner, known to a very select few by his call sign, Ghost, carefully examined the rosebush he was pretending to prune. His eyes, hidden beneath the brim of his hat, weren't focused on the flowers. They were mapping sightlines, noting the position of security cameras, counting the seconds it took for patrol patterns to cycle. Old habits died hard. He'd been doing this kind of work for 6 months, and before that, he'd done landscaping at 3 other corporate campuses. It was honest work, peaceful. Exactly what he'd been looking for when he left his previous life behind 20 years ago. The life where his call sign meant something, where he'd spent 2 decades in Marine Force reconnaissance, executing operations that would never appear in any official record. But even in retirement, even pushing a wheelbarrow and trimming hedges, he couldn't turn off the part of his brain that assessed, calculated, and prepared. He noticed things. The blind spot near the loading dock, the security officer who checked his phone more than his surroundings, the delivery entrance that stayed propped open for convenience. He noticed, but he said nothing. It wasn't his job anymore. He was just the gardener. At 1:47 p.m., William was edging the walkway near the main plaza when he heard it. Not the sound itself, that would come later, but the absence of sound. The sudden shift in the ambient noise of the campus, the way conversations seemed to pause mid-sentence, the change in the rhythm of footsteps. He straightened slowly, his back protesting the movement. His eyes scanned the plaza. Most people continued their routines, oblivious. But a few had stopped. They were looking toward the main entrance of Building 1, their expressions confused, uncertain. Then, he saw him. A man in his 30s, wearing a long coat despite the warm afternoon, walking with stiff determination toward the main doors. The coat was wrong for the weather. The walk was wrong for the environment. And his right hand was hidden inside the coat, gripping something. William's mind shifted gears instantly. 20 years of dormant training activated like a switch being flipped. Threat assessment, immediate. Distance, 40 yards. Civilians in potential crossfire, 12, maybe 15. Security response time, unknown, likely too slow. The man reached the glass doors of Building 1. In one smooth motion, He pulled out a handgun and fired twice into the ceiling. The sound shattered the afternoon calm. Screaming erupted instantly. People scattered in every direction, some freezing in panic, others running blindly. William Turner didn't run toward the gunfire. Running would draw attention, create panic, make him a target. Instead, he moved with purposeful efficiency, closing the distance in a way that looked almost casual to anyone who might glance his way. His hands released the wheelbarrow, and his body shifted into a posture he hadn't used in 2 decades. Balanced, centered, ready. Inside Building 1, the gunman was shouting. His words were unclear through the glass, but his intent was obvious. He was waving the weapon at a group of employees who had frozen near the reception desk. More shots fired into the walls, more screaming. The plaza emptied as people fled in every direction. Security Chief Reynolds was already moving. He burst from the operations center, radio in hand, shouting orders. All units, active shooter, Building 1 main entrance. Lockdown protocol now. Chen, call 911. Get SWAT rolling. Martinez, Wilson, you're with me. Reynolds and his 2 officers sprinted across the campus, their hands on their holstered weapons. They had trained for this scenario dozens of times in simulations. But simulations didn't account for the adrenaline, the fear, the knowledge that real lives were at stake. William was already at the building's side entrance. A service door that he knew from his landscaping routes was usually unlocked during business hours. He tested it. Open. He slipped inside, moving through a maintenance corridor that ran parallel to the main lobby. His breathing was controlled, his mind clear. This was familiar territory, even if the context was different. Assess, adapt, act. He could hear the gunman now, his voice high-pitched, desperate. Nobody move. I said don't move. Where is he? Where's Patterson? Someone tell me where Patterson is. A personal grudge. Target specific. That changed the dynamic. William reached the end of the corridor and peered through a small window that gave him a partial view of the lobby. The gunman had his back partially turned. The weapon pointed at 5 employees huddled together. The man's hands were shaking, nervous, angry, dangerous. Reynolds and his team burst through the main entrance, weapons drawn. Drop your weapon! Now! Security! Drop it! The gunman spun toward them, and William saw the situation deteriorating in real time. The angle was wrong. Reynolds and his officers were in a direct line with the hostages behind the gunman. If shooting started, civilians would die. Back off! The gunman screamed. Back off or I start shooting them! I'll do it! Reynolds held his ground, but William could see the hesitation in the young security chief's posture. He was trained, but this wasn't training. This was chaos, and he was about to make a fatal mistake, either by retreating and giving the gunman confidence, or by advancing and triggering a massacre. William made his decision. He pushed through the maintenance door and entered the lobby from the side, his approach silent. The gunman's attention was locked on Reynolds. The hostages saw William but were too terrified to react. One woman's eyes widened, but William raised a single finger to his lips. Silent. He closed the distance to 15 feet, 12 feet, 10 feet. His movements were those of someone who had spent years learning to be invisible, to move through hostile territory undetected. Ghost hadn't been just a nickname. It had been an accurate description. At 8 feet, the gunman's peripheral vision caught movement. He started to turn. William was already in motion. The training from 2 decades ago took over completely. He closed the final distance in 3 explosive steps, his left hand striking the gunman's wrist with precise force, redirecting the weapon away from the hostages. His right hand followed through, striking the man's elbow joint, collapsing his arm. The gun clattered to the floor. William's momentum carried him forward, using the gunman's own unbalanced weight against him. A sweep of the leg, a controlled takedown, and the gunman was face down on the marble floor with William's knee on his back and his arm twisted into a compliance hold. The entire sequence took 8 seconds. The lobby was silent, except for the gunman's gasping breaths. Reynolds and his officers stood frozen, their weapons still drawn, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. The hostages remained huddled together, too shocked to move. William didn't look up. His voice was calm, almost quiet. "Someone want to cuff him?" Reynolds snapped back to reality. "Martinez, cuffs, now!" He moved forward, holstering his weapon, staring at the elderly gardener who had just neutralized an armed threat with his bare hands. "Mr. Turner, what the hell? How did you—" William stood slowly, his knees protesting the sudden activity. He brushed dirt from his work pants. "He's not going anywhere. You should check on those people. Make sure they're okay." 15 minutes later, the campus was swarming with police. SWAT had arrived, cleared the building, and taken custody of the gunman. Paramedics were checking hostages, and William Turner sat on a concrete planter, accepting a bottle of water, looking like he wanted to get back to his gardening. Reynolds stood nearby, giving his statement to a detective, but his eyes kept drifting to the old man. "That's the one who took down the shooter?" Reynolds nodded. "The gardener, William Turner. 1 second the guy had a gun on 5 people, the next he was on the ground and Turner was standing over him." The detective's eyebrows rose. "The gardener did that?" "We were still figuring out our approach," Reynolds admitted. "Turner just handled it." The detective walked over to William. "Mr. Turner, I'm Detective Bradley. I need your statement." William looked up. "Not much to tell. Man had a gun. People were in danger. I was close enough to do something." "Sir, you disarmed an active shooter with your bare hands. Do you have training? Military background?" William was quiet. "I was in the Marines, long time ago." "What was your MOS?" "Rifleman, basic infantry." The detective studied him. Something didn't add up. Before he could press further, a black SUV pulled up. A man in his 50s stepped out, flashed credentials, then walked directly to William. "William Turner?" William recognized the military bearing immediately. "That's me. Colonel Marcus Webb, retired, private security consultant. When I heard the description of what happened, elderly man, flawless disarm, I made a call to Quantico. Ran your name through classified databases." William's expression didn't change. "I'm just a gardener, Colonel." William Ghost Turner, Marine Force Reconnaissance, 1975 to 1995. 237 operations, most classified. Silver Star, Bronze Star with V device. You were one of the original operators when Force Recon was evolving direct action capabilities. The detective stepped closer. "Force Recon? Like Special Forces?" Webb nodded. "Elite reconnaissance and direct action. These guys go places that don't exist, do things that never happened. The call sign, Ghost, wasn't an accident." Reynolds approached, listening. "Mr. Turner, you were Special Operations? For 20 years? William stood up. "I was a Marine who did what I was told. That was a long time ago. Now I'm a gardener who happened to be in the right place." Webb smiled. "Marines don't have an off switch, Turner. That takedown was textbook. You assessed, adapted, acted. You saved lives." One of the hostages, a young woman, walked over with tears streaming. "Mr. Turner, I've seen you around for months. I never knew. Thank you so much." William looked uncomfortable. "You don't need to thank me. I'm just glad everyone's safe." Reynolds cleared his throat. "Mr. Turner, I owe you an apology. I've watched you work for 6 months and thought you were just—" "You didn't think an old gardener could handle himself," William finished, gently. "That's okay. I left that life behind because I wanted to be just an old gardener. The world has enough warriors, not enough people who know how to make things grow." Webb pulled out a business card. "Mr. Turner, if you ever want to consult or train, give me a call. The community takes care of its own." William pocketed the card politely. "I appreciate that, Colonel, but I've got roses that need pruning. That's enough for me these days." The news crews were setting up. William quietly slipped away before they could get his story. He walked back to his wheelbarrow, still sitting where he'd left it near the rose bushes. The roses didn't care about his past. They just needed someone patient enough to help them grow. As he picked up his pruning shears, a young security officer approached nervously. "Mr. Turner, I just wanted to say, that was incredible. Where did you learn to do that?" William looked at the roses, then at the young officer. A long time ago, I learned that the best way to protect something is to never let the threat see you coming. Today, I got to use that one more time. But honestly, son, I'd rather just be invisible. Less exciting, but better for the roses. 2 weeks later, William was back to his routine. 6 a.m. arrival, wheelbarrow, pruning shears, the quiet rhythm of maintaining the campus grounds. The incident had made national news for a day, but the media hadn't gotten his name. To most people on campus, he was still just the gardener. But some things had changed. Security Chief Reynolds approached him one morning. "Mr. Turner, got a minute?" William straightened slowly. "Morning, Chief. I've been thinking since the incident. Our security training. We're good at technology, but weak on the human element. Would you consult? Run some scenario training for my team?" William held up a hand. "That's not my world anymore. You've got good people. They just need to trust their instincts more than their equipment." "One session," Reynolds pressed. "Just share what you know." William considered the roses he still needed to tend. Then he thought about the young officers, well-meaning but untested. One session. But we do it my way. The following Saturday, Reynolds assembled his team. They expected a lecture. Instead, William had them meet outside. "Security isn't about watching monitors," William began. "It's about awareness. Notice when something changes." He spent 3 hours teaching them things no manual covered. How to read body language from 100 yards. How to identify threat patterns. How to move without drawing attention. "The best security is invisible," he told them. "Just like the best gardener knows plants don't need to be forced. They need to be understood." Officer Chen spoke up. "Mr. Turner, in your force recon days, what was the most important skill?" William thought for a moment. "Patience. Everyone thinks special operations is about action, speed, violence. Sometimes it is. But mostly, it's about waiting, watching, being ready for the moment that matters." After the session, young Officer Martinez lingered. "Sir, can I ask something personal? You spent 20 years doing dangerous work. How did you just walk away? How do you go from being the ghost to being a gardener?" William smiled. "The hardest part of special operations isn't the danger. It's coming home and realizing the world doesn't need warriors as much as it needs people who can build things, grow things. I did my time protecting. Now I get to spend my time creating. That's not a step down. That's an evolution. But don't you miss it?" "Every single day," William admitted. "But I sleep better knowing I'm planting roses instead of planning operations. Both matter, just at different times in life." Months passed. The roses bloomed. William's wheelbarrow made its daily rounds. Campus security improved quietly, incorporating lessons from a gardener who'd once been a ghost. One afternoon, William was trimming hedges when a young Marine in dress blues approached. "Excuse me, sir. Are you William Turner?" William set down his shears. "I am. My instructor at Force Recon, Gunnery Sergeant Hayes, said if I was ever here I should find you. He said you were one of the originals." William studied the young Marine. Eager, proud, ready. He saw his own younger self. "What's your name, son?" "Lance Corporal Mitchell, sir." "You heading to your first deployment?" "Yes, sir. 6 months." William handed him his pruning shears. "See that rose bush? The spent blooms. Carefully cut them just above the first 5-leaf stem." Mitchell trimmed the roses as William watched. "Good. Now, why did I have you do that?" "I'm not sure, sir. Because in 6 months, you're going to be in places where precision matters more than power, where patience saves lives and rushing gets people killed, where you have to know the difference between what looks dead and what just needs the right care to bloom again." William took the shears back. "Remember that when you're downrange. Sometimes the most important skill isn't knowing when to act. It's knowing when to wait." The young Marine nodded. "Thank you, sir. Semper Fi." "Semper Fi, son. Stay safe. As Mitchell walked away, William returned to his roses. The campus buzzed around him. People rushing to meetings, students studying, security officers on patrol. And in the middle of it all, invisible and content, worked a man who'd learned that the greatest strength isn't in being the warrior everyone sees, but in being the protector no one notices, until the moment they're needed. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe for more stories of quiet masters who prove that wisdom never becomes obsolete.